All right, let's talk Florida State Seminoles. This is a program, and we don't need to go too much into it, but what happened in 2024 was an absolute travesty. We're going to put it in the past where it belongs and focus on the future because that's what the Florida State coaching staff is. And to that point, there's kind of an unheralded, surprising freshman. This is not a guy anyone saw coming who was off to an incredible start for the Seminoles program. We'll get into that in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick, that's Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, this Florida State program trying to bounce back from last season, and I think anytime you have just a debacle of a season, you need a new sort of generation, a new cadre of playmakers to emerge. That means transfers, that means backups becoming starters, stepping into leadership roles, and that means freshmen coming in and having a big impact. And usually you rely on your top flight, your big name recruits to really lead the way. But in this case, there's one kind of under the radar playmaker that's off to a great start. Let's get into this report, listening to Coach Mike Norvell describe this unheralded freshman courtesy of 24/7 Sports. Norvell says, I think Javen Boggs, he's done really well. You see, there's still more. He's not a finished product right now, but you see the competition. You sense his presence. He's made some big plays here in the first 8 practices. Today, there's one I'm sure he'd love to have back in a situation, but it's the growth. I can see already that he's not one who gets rattled. He has a good play, bad play, whatever it is. He wants to get coached. He wants to go get better. The expectation for Boggs coming out was that he'd be a higher floor player, one with a refined skill set that could make up for a lack of elite physical tools to help give him a chance to play early. It sounds like he's been exactly what FSU expected and perhaps more early on. Yeah, again, he was not a big name recruit. He was sort of like, solid player, maybe come in and help you out early, but it looks like he has actually more potential than a lot of the recruiting analysts believed here. Potential still here, maybe for Florida State, at the very least, an early impact player. Mize, I'm curious your thoughts on this. But first, Seminoles fans in the comment section below, as you look towards 2025, what's one freshman, maybe it's Boggs, maybe it's someone else, that you expect to have an immediate impact? A new guy on campus that's going to really help Florida State turn around what happened last year. Give us that freshman you expect to do big things for the Seminoles this year. Put them in the comment section below. But Mize, over to you now. What are your thoughts on this latest news out of Tallahassee?
Yeah, like I think when you talk about Boggs, you talk about this Florida State receiving core. They really need some guys to step up. There's injuries, things like that going on, but they need these freshmen to do well. And there's a couple of good freshmen on this team, but I think Boggs is the most interesting because, like you alluded to in the article, this is a guy that wasn't expected to be, as good as he's doing so far. He was a guy that came in. He had the physical tools. He's like 6'1", 200 pounds, a bigger guy as far as size goes, and is able to come out there and just there's like good floor with him. He had a really solid floor, but now they're starting to see him in practice. He hits the field and he's kind of over exceeding expectations. He's being better than they ever thought that he was coming into this spring ball type of period. I think that's a really good sign for Florida State going forward because this is a team, like you said, after last year, they really need a lot of help. They need some guys to step up. And if you can have some freshmen come in and step up and really help bounce this thing right into the future, I think you're going to be a good place because Florida State overall, after last season, it was bad. But what they did this offseason, I think was very impressive for the season that they did have last year, especially in the transfer portal department. This is the team that was able to go out and have a top 10, number 7 transfer portal class this offseason, which I think is really killer for Florida State to come out and say, hey, I know 2 years ago, we were one of the best teams in football. Unfortunate injury to quarterback, not able to make college football playoff. Last year, bad year. We just need a couple of guys to come in and help and get us back to where we know we should be. They're able to do that. They had a really great transfer portal class. Probably focus a lot of attention and money on that transfer portal class. Their recruiting class, not too bad, 18th overall, but just not the same category as that 7th ranked transfer portal class. But now, if you got guys in your recruiting class that are over exceeding expectations, that's going to make this recruiting class be a little bit better than people think it's going to be. It's going to be higher than 18. You're gonna, if you have a couple of guys that come out here, 3 stars like Boggs, who are going to just jump into and be potential day one contributors, this could be a class that, rebounds up into the top 10 easily. And that's what they need. They need over expectations. They need guys to come out and overperform what they thought they were going to do because that's what's going to help this team bounce back the fast. I think they've got a lot of players that are really good on this roster still. I think they brought in a lot of transfers, but I think these freshmen coming in are already performing so well that this Florida State team, they're setting themselves up for something special. I think we're going to see a hero to zero to hero again type of, lineage for this Florida State Seminoles team. I think next year it's going to surprise a lot of people because we saw what happened last year, the downfall, but now they're on a hard upswing. I would say this is a team really just shooting for the moon. I think this is a team that's going to contend for their division this year. I think it's going to be a really good season for the Seminoles.
Well, I think it's one of those things where when it comes to recruiting and evaluations of recruiting classes, you run into a similar problem that often happens in the NFL where, these analysts, whether it's in the media or on teams, again, both professionally or collegiately, what they do is they sit there and look at the sort of the art of the possible, so to speak. Well, what could this player become? And sometimes you fall in love with just amazing skill sets and great athletic traits. They see a receiver 6'5", 220 and runs a really good 40, and runs a 4.4 40 and has good footwork. They're like, oh my goodness, this is Calvin Johnson 2.0 or something like that. And maybe he can be, but the reality is, this isn't a track meet. This isn't a, modeling event where people take your measurements. This isn't, a bodybuilding competition where they look at your body fat percentage and your proportions and say, oh, this guy's the best. This is football, right? And good football players tend to be good football players. And Boggs was a guy who was just a really good football player in high school. Was it the highest level of Florida high school competition? No. But it was a good program. It was a really good program. And he played well. And he was a good football player with a decent skill set in terms of athletic toolkit, but wasn't as highly talented as a bunch of other guys. Was he as big or as strong or 40 as fast or as fast twitch or anything like that? No. But the reality is we don't play games on the 40-yard dash track, right? We play games, on the football field. So let's get players that are good at football. So sometimes when you see recruiting rankings that say 18 in this case for Florida State, it's predicated on, well, what could the athletic tool set of the recruiting class eventually become? Sometimes I just want guys that are good football players. And we see this at the NFL level sometimes. We'll have guys fall in the draft out of the first round, fall into the second round, third round, things like that. And the answer is like, well, his 40 time was, 5/100ths of a second slower than people thought. I'm like, oh, you mean the guy who was a three-time All-American ran a 4.55 instead of 4.48, and so you didn't take him in the top 10 where he belonged, and some team got him in the second round? That's pretty stupid. Unfortunately, that's how it works at both levels. And I think Florida State is proving it here with Boggs, right? You look at a guy, three-star recruit, and all he was just a really good football player. And sometimes the code for that, you hear the language, he's a higher floor player, which basically means we don't think his tool set physically is as good as some other guys, but he's just really good at what he does. So he'll be able to come in and contribute right away. So I think Florida State has themselves a steal here. And getting players like this is how you quickly accelerate a turnaround from a debacle of a 2024 campaign. Because guess what? Better football players mean better football teams. Better football teams mean more wins. I know that's a shocking revelation to anyone watching, but that's the truth. That's the reality of it. You need better football players, not better 40-yard dash runners, not people with better physiques or not people that have better vertical leaps, better football players. And I think that's what Florida State with Mike Norvell has done this offseason, whether through the transfer portal, whether through the recruiting classes. They've gotten a lot of good quality football players. The question now for this program is getting everyone integrated, getting off to good starts, getting everyone on the same page, learning the offense, learning defense, special teams, the habits, the routines, things like that, mental toughness, all of those factors that are so critical. And then when it comes to Boggs' perspective, it looks like he's just dominating in all those areas, right? He's off to a great start. I love the mental toughness element, right? Norvell mentioning he doesn't get rattled. He had a play he didn't like, a bad play, but he still was able to bounce back. Good plays don't just get him out of the loop either. I love the mental side of it. I think that's one of the things that I was really disappointed with by the Seminoles in 2024. Even when things weren't going their way, I think they lacked the mental fortitude as a team to kind of bounce back. Leadership was a big problem when you lose a lot of leaders like they did last offseason. Sometimes that happens. I'm looking at the fact that Boggs, as a true freshman, stepping in so early, making the right mental things, the right mental decisions, having that mental toughness, great sign for him. Because look, it's going to be bumpy, right? This is not a team that's going to suddenly go 12-0 next year, right? If they do fantastic, I don't think anyone's predicting that. This is a team, though, that can win a lot of football games to go back to competing at the top of the ACC. I think the reality is there's going to be some bumps, there's going to be some bad quarters, there's going to be some duds of games. It just happens. You have to have the mental toughness to bounce back. Last year, they didn't. Boggs's, or at least the comments related to Boggs, makes me think he will have that. And getting guys that are good football players with that mental toughness off to great starts is important for Florida State. This is an outstanding sign for the Seminoles going forward.
You talk about good football players, and that's just what Javon Boggs is. This is a guy who did a lot of great things in high school. Is he the most like physically gifted, speed wise, things like that? No, not necessarily. But when he got on the field, he did really good things. That junior campaign that was so prolific for him, 1,500 yards and 24 touchdowns in a year. That's why he is the Florida Dairy Farmers Mr. Football for that year. I think that was a very funny title, but it just shows this guy is really, really good player. He just did a lot of special things on the field, and sometimes we talk about this on our NFL channel a lot. There's certain players throughout the league. We think like Orlando Brown Jr. is one that really pops up to mind. Is when he was at Oklahoma, coming in, to the draft, he was ugly body type, just not pretty, not just like a really jacked guy, kind of overweight a little bit. He had sloppy technique, but he always got the job done. He was able to play football at a high level, and he was always winning his matchups and doing what he needed to do on the field. And that reminds me of Boggs. Maybe, he's decent size, but maybe he's not quick enough. Maybe he's not that. But you look at what he did on the field, 1,500 yards, 24 touchdowns. That's something. That translates. What can you do on the field? You can't always judge it, like you said, by the numbers. You can't look at, what somebody's spark score is or, what their relative athletic score is. Those things don't always translate to the field. I think it's more common that good play on the field translate to a good football player than good locker room, good gym scores, good things like that translate to a good football player. There are times that these things do cross paths, but I think more times than not, if someone's a really solid football player, it translates to the next level. That's what we see in Boggs here, and I think that's what Florida State is going to get out of this play.